Hey makeup friends, and welcome back to my channel. Or if you are new here, then hello and welcome. My name is Kara, and on my channel we like to mix beauty, brains, and the occasional F-bomb. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 5 eyeshadow palettes that I am decluttering from my collection. I'll take you through them, tell you why I'm letting them go, and then we will wrap it up. That's all we're going to talk about today. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so I've got the palettes sitting in front of me. We are going to go through them in no particular order. Some of them are older and have been in my collection for quite some time, and some of them were released within the last half year or so. But they all have various reasons as to why I am saying goodbye to them. I did do an eyeshadow palette declutter in December, but these ones I did save at that point, but in really looking at my collection and in looking at what it is that I'm reaching for over and over again, I've come to the decision that these palettes just don't really bring anything to the table for me, given the other palettes that I have. Alright, so first up we're going to talk about this one here. This was part of the ABH Novena collection. It's the Mini Pro Pigment Palette Volume 2, and it is very bright and fun looking. It's basically all mattes with the exception of 2 shimmer shadows in there. But this is one of those palettes that every time I pull it out of the drawer to use, I end up just staring at it and blinking and not being able to figure out what I want to do with it. So what inevitably ends up happening is I stare at it for far longer than I need to, and then I put it back in the drawer and I reach for a different palette. And that happens repeatedly. In fact, I think I've only actually worn this on my eyes 2 or 3 times at most. So while the shadows do perform nicely, it's just not a palette that inspires me. It's just not anything that I ever think to reach for. And like I said, when I do make the conscious decision to reach for it, I end up putting it back in the drawer because I don't know what to do with it. So I'm going to pass this on to my friend Erin. She is wildly creative, and I think that she's going to have a lot more fun with this palette than I do. So I want it to go to a good home, and I know that she will have fun with this. Now, another palette that I bring out and I stare at and then I just put away and grab for something else is this one from Colourpop. This is the Lil Ray of Sunshine palette. I'm going to be straight up, I bought it because of the packaging. I love sunflowers, I'm a sucker for cute packaging, and this one drew me in. I should have known better because it's an all matte palette, and I tend not to gravitate towards all matte looks, despite the fact that I'm wearing an all matte look today. It's just usually not my go-to. And this is just one of those palettes that it frankly looks different in person than what I was expecting it to look based on the pictures on the website. And it just, I don't know, the colors just don't do it for me. The yellows are a little bit too muted, they're not punchy enough, they're not, I don't know, like these ones here just are kind of dirty and grungy looking and not in the good way. The yellow in the middle is beautiful, but the rest of the shades with it just don't really do anything for me, with the exception of maybe this one and this one. So like these 3 in here, but the rest of them I'm just not a really big fan of, and I do have these kind of tones in other palettes, and that's what I end up doing, is I stare at this one and then I put it away and I reach for one of those palettes instead. So this one has never been used, and so I want to send it off to somebody who will use it, and I do have a friend in mind for this one. This palette here is from Quo Beauty. It's a Canadian makeup brand carried at Shoppers Drug Mart. This is, I'm not sure what it's called, to be honest. I don't see a name on it, but I think it was their holiday palette from 2019 or possibly 2018, but I think it was 2019. And there are some very pretty shades in there. Pinks and purples tend to be right in my wheelhouse. I really love those tones. I love what they do for the color of my eyes. They're very flattering on me. But these shadows just consistently disappoint me. There is a nice mix of mattes and shimmers, but the problem with the shimmers is that regardless of what base I use, they just disappear. They crease, they fade, and by the end of the day, you can barely even see them on the eyes. So I have a number of palettes that have similar tones to this, but where the shadows are going to last throughout the day with or without a glitter glue underneath them. And so they're easier to use in that sense, and they're also much more consistent in terms of their performance. While the mattes in here do blend out nicely, they don't really have that oomph to them that I'm looking for and that a lot of other palettes in my collection deliver. So this is just a palette that I end up overlooking time and time again. However, I think it's a palette that my daughter's really going to have fun playing with, so I'm going to be giving it to her because I think she'll have a lot of fun with these shades here, and frankly, if they disappear over the course of the day on her, she's not going to care, so this is right up her alley. Next up then is this palette here from Stila, and this is the After Hours palette. It is very pretty, but I don't reach for it. I have so many neutral palettes that I really, really love that I just tend to overlook this one. So while it does have some really pretty tones in there, in particular, let's see here, this green shade here and then this like purpley kind of pink over here, it's not enough for me to remember to pull this palette out. It's just not a palette that ever hits on my radar, even though it sits out in the open on a shelf. So I don't feel that I really need this one, and then if I want a more shimmery sort of neutral kind of tone to put all over the lids, those are really prevalent in a ton of palettes. So I'm not going to be missing anything by passing this palette on to somebody who will get more use out of it. So the last palette that I have decided to let go is this one from Rare Beauty. This is the Magnetic Spirit palette, and it does have some very pretty shades in there, but it's just not a palette that I really enjoy using. This is just a palette that I can't really use it as a palette. I have to bring in other shades because there's no matte shades in this palette. And then in wearing those two shades on my eyes throughout the day, first of all, the purple just kind of faded away. Like the purple itself disappeared and I just was left with a really dark, almost black kind of base to it. And so it just faded strangely throughout the day and I wasn't a fan of that. And then this more shimmery purple over here, it just didn't pack as much of a punch as I would want it to. And I frankly think that's on brand for Rare Beauty. I really feel like they are more of a subtle approach to makeup. I think it's more about just gentle washes of color and things of that sort, which is completely fine, but I prefer something a bit more punchy. So I'm just going to do like a really quick comparison between this shade here and a shade in the Plain Jane palette from Adept Cosmetics because they are fairly similar in terms of their tone. So here we go. This one is from Rare Beauty here. And then this one is from the Plain Jane. And so I'm not sure if the camera will really pick up the difference between them, but the Plain Jane just has so much more impact on the eyes, and what you see is what you get all day long. It doesn't fade, it doesn't crease, it doesn't move around on the lids, and that's not to say that the Rare Beauty does, but because it's so subtle to begin with, by the end of the day, it really is sort of struggling on the lids. It's not bunched up, it's not creased or anything of that sort, but it's just lackluster. And so between the two, when I'm doing makeup, I'm going to go for Plain Jane every time. It doesn't really occur to me to bring the Rare Beauty palette out. So while there are some pretty shades in there, it's just not serving any purpose in my collection with the options that I have available to me. So I do want to pass this on to a friend who is going to get more use out of it. I love the packaging on it. And if subtle washes of color are more your thing, you might really like this palette, but for me, it's just one that I ignore because I have so many other options and because I prefer, say, for example, in this situation, I prefer the impact that this shadow gives over the Rare Beauty. All right, and there we have it, guys. Short and sweet today. I've been staring at my eyeshadow collection and really thinking about what it is that I reach for, what it is that I really enjoy, and what palettes I just continuously overlook. And these ones are the ones that stuck out to me. And so I thought, you know what, now's the time. Let's just let them go from my collection and just free up that much more space. So that is what I'm doing. I would be curious to know from you guys, do you enjoy this kind of approach to declutter where it's just a few little items here and there? Or do you prefer when it's like a full-on series where it might take a few videos to go through everything. I'm just curious to know what approach you guys enjoy best. All right, but with that said, I'm going to wrap this video up here. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next one. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.